No. Hello, folks. Howdy. We are finally over with the 2021-2022 season. We welcome the Stanley Cup champion Colorado Avalanche, who beat Tampa Bay last night 2-1 in a hotly contested Game 6. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Eck will be joining us any moment, but we will start with the pre-show. Go ahead, Russ.
So, I'm not sure what's happening with Major League Baseball, but now here's the latest on the actual baseballs. So now they're attempting to standardize them and standardize how they're handled by every team in the entire league. So basically, you have to have somebody, one person on your team, rub up the balls. I guess it's going to be with the Mississippi Mud. They didn't say. I'm just assuming it's going to still be that.
Right.
You have to do that. You have to have them in the humidor for a certain amount of time. I don't know why. Honestly, I don't know why every team is using a humidor. Is it really just because Colorado is?
Right. That makes absolutely no sense. I mean, with
sense.
Colorado, it does.
And they sent out a video. Now, here's the thing. We all could get this video, and we're all going to rub up the balls differently. Like we are. There is no way to standardize that. But talk amongst yourselves. I have a knock at the door.
Oh, okay. Kev, I mean, I don't understand. I mean, the whole purpose of the humidor with Colorado was because of the altitude, and that made things more even with other ballparks. Now, if everybody's putting it in the humidor, I would expect that's probably the reason why home runs. I think home runs are down this year precipitously from what they were last year. So that doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I mean, there's clearly something wrong, and I think everyone's aware of it, and they've just got to figure it out. But you're right, and with the way that players today are concentrating on launch angles and bat speed, and something's wrong, something's off. So, and the baseball is the most obvious choice. So
the problem with the baseball too is a lot of guys are getting hit. Like the Mets have been hit a record number of times. You saw Bryce Harper just got his thumb broken. Alonso was hit twice, big time on his hand. Luckily, nothing was broken. A lot of guys are getting hit because the pitchers have sort of lost control of that inside pitch that they used to be able to paint on the corner. So, this has affected the entire game, and they've just gotten around to it now.
Well, I'll bring it to hockey. It's something that I've talked about and how I think it's inherently unfair, but I don't think the NHL is ever going to do something about it, is the fact that, like, the state tax situation in 4 or 5 hockey teams, they have a distinct advantage. Florida, Tampa, I think Nashville, Arizona, and there's a couple others where there are no tax states. So, a team like the Lightning can pay Victor Hedman 7.8 or whatever the hell he's making when he's a $10 million defenseman, but he gets more of his money because he's in Florida, and Stamkos and other they are paying their players less because they get more of that money because of the state tax rules. And I think that's inherently unfair to like Rangers or Toronto or Montreal, where they're in heavy taxed areas, and it doesn't balance out. There's creative accounting, and these players get like heavy signing bonuses, so they get their bonus when they're living in Arizona, like Austin Matthews. But it's really unfair, and I don't know if the league can ever do anything about it, but it is unfair.
Yeah, but I don't know. What can you do about it? It's just
I heard somebody say that the possibility would be there to set up a corporate entity for the league where they're all technically being paid in one state, like Delaware, and then the tax rules for that state would apply to all the employees.
That seems like a ridiculous task. Here's what I would say.
The states would go for that.
Never. Well, yeah, and the revolt that would happen, people would be upset with hockey players over it. That's not going to work.
Nobody complained about this with Tampa up until 2004, so we could start there. It wasn't. Nobody had any issues. Nobody ever complained. I never heard one thing about when Tampa was underperforming, how this was an issue.
Someone saying Arizona has an unfair advantage.
No, Russ. It was when the salary cap was put in. We didn't care anything.
I mean, you know what a bigger thing is.
Okay, but wait. I just want to say one other thing. If you're a good team or you're in a market that's a good market, like the Rangers got Adam Fox and Artemi Panarin. They didn't get them because of any kind of tax thing. They got them because those guys wanted to play there. So if you create an environment where players want to play, they don't care about the tax situation anymore.
I mean, the most unfair thing is that the Canadian teams are dealing with is paying people in American money. You know, like I mean, that's that. If you want to talk about really unfair, with the Canadian teams having to pay their players in American money versus having to play, you know, big, and then I mean, they're not charging American money for their tickets. You know, people are coming in and playing. And I've talked to people about it before, and they say, you know, the price of living is you know, tickets are more expensive in Toronto because of that to a degree and everything like that. But
wasn't there some sort of
it's part of the CBA. Everybody gets paid in U.S. funds.
Yeah.
Right. No, what I'm saying is, but wasn't there at one point the league was paying the teams to deal with that? Like they got some sort of reimbursement.
There might
be.
Be.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know if that's still going. He would think.
No,
I don't know if it's still going on either, but.
It's not because that was when the Canadian dollar was it was $1.40.
Right.
Now it's like $1.21 or something like that. So
it's significant though. I mean, like, you know, we pay our writers in American money. You know, so the guys, people make like $200 or whatever.
I was lobbying for Bitcoin. Come on.
I know if I'm sending someone $200 in Canada, they're getting $240. You know, roughly $230, whatever it is.
Yeah, right after someone was trying to convince me that Bitcoin was a great investment, that collapsed for the first time in Bitcoin history. I mean, literally, it was like 3 days later when I.
Come on, Kev. Haven't you learned never listen to Eck when it comes to finances?
Yeah.
Your Bobby Orr card is worth more than Bitcoin.
It's a joke. Stop.
Yeah, exactly. So
I don't own a stock. That's how conservative I am with investing. So don't even think about it.
You're smart because it's like
our money is in our home. You know, that's where we put our money. Anyway, all right.
Here we go. Your dress. Come on.
Yeah, right. All right, let's start this. Here we go. Hello, Hockey World. It is Monday, June 27th, 2022, the official beginning of what I'm going to call the on season.
I don't know what that means. I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen, Hockey Buzz, and I've always had the debate whether or not the draft is the start or the end of a season.
Yes, that's a good one. And I'm Eck, and you watch HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. It feels like the beginning of the next season.
To me too, but that's not how people see it. So.
Right, because the pay, they're still getting paid also through the end. You know, so the pay usually the draft.
Well, the fiscal year this year starts July 13th. So you could say
before that should be technically last year, which means the draft should be part of the end of this season. But anyway, I'm Eck, and you're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the podcast that comes every Monday through Friday to fill you in on the comings and goings in the hockey world, and we have a Stanley Cup champion. All of this is done. All this pointless meandering and crazy games have determined that the Colorado Avalanche are the best team in the land, and they are the best team in the land, and the best team in the land won this year. You know, and I think that usually happens. I think for the most part, because it feels like, you know, Cinderella teams tend to getting through the final for a Cinderella team is always a tough thing. But this year, we really didn't have any Cinderella teams. We really had two. We had the two best teams there, and Colorado was the best team, and they won. And a couple things real quick about the game, and then we'll go on to the on seasons, I guess because we got a lot to talk about. But a couple things I really was kind of touched by. I'm always touched by players on the ice and what they say and things like that. It's always a really cool thing. They've made commercials about it, even, right? But there was a real sense of something, you know, going on there, you know, between like McKinnon, Eric Johnson, and just the whole concept of this team really, really was in it for them, was in this, you know, to win. And they were really there for each other. It feels like a really tight-knit group. Like, just the way you listen to them talk.
Well, yeah, I mean, Eric Johnson and Jack Johnson go back to Team USA. I covered them in 2010. You know, they were on that team together, so they've known each other forever. Yeah. I think Eric Johnson, just because of the golf cart incident, never really became the defenseman that he was supposed to be. But for this organization, he was the guy that they needed.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that got to me, well, there was two things. McKinnon talked about his billet dad. That got me in the heart. I mean, he's going to make sure he brings the cup to him. I did see I think I saw McKinnon hit another level of maturity in these playoffs, and I had detailed it in some articles just based on the way he was handling the adversity. But then the last thing was, when you saw Ryan Murray carrying that cup. Imagine if they had Ryan Murray actually playing. That's how much depth Colorado had to win this cup, and that's why I picked them to win it, because nobody could match their depth. In the end, Tampa couldn't either.
The real like impact that like Cogliano had, you heard that in the way people spoke. He really had a major impact on that team. Just not as much on the ice, but just the way his been through so many games and so much history. I thought the funniest thing McKinnon said was, I was watching the Canadian feed from Hockey Night in Canada, and they asked him, so do you think Crosby will be at your celebration, up there when you bring the cup back to town? And he said, well, I was the most drunk guy at his 2 celebrations, so he better be.
Yeah,
that was great. That was amazing.
He also talked about the fact that he got the room number in the Tampa hotel, and it was the last 2 numbers were 87, which sort of like it was significant in terms of, because obviously him and Crosby are very close.
Yeah.
But Kev, I just you look, we know that other teams in this league always look at the teams that make the Stanley Cup final and sort of try to emulate them, or like, okay, now we have to match up. It's pretty tough for like 30 other teams to look at these teams and say, we can match up to them, because they're so deep, they're so talented, they're so experienced. In Colorado, Jack Johnson was their 8th defenseman. They were without Murray, they were without Girard, and they still had 6 defensemen that were good enough to win a Stanley Cup.
Yeah, I was happy for Jack Johnson, just as Russ was talking about. He's gone through a lot. His parents to get taking his money, and it just he's had a struggle, and really has never really sort of been the defenseman everyone had hoped he would be. He had some moments, but not that level of consistency. But what I really appreciated about the Colorado win is, we know them as an offensive team and a deep team. But, in the clinching game, they won a game 2-1.
Yeah.
They had to play, that tight, close, low-scoring game, and they can do that too. And much of this series, there's been a lot of discussion about what was happening with the Tampa Bay Lightning, and I thought it kind of overshadowed how good Colorado did. And I went back and looked, and they were coming out of last season, everyone's pick to win it all. Everybody recognized the talent level they had.
Yep.
It's not a surprise that they have gotten there. But, when you're the top team, you got to perform. And I think there was more pressure on them as well, because everybody had said right from the beginning. And Tampa Bay was a formidable opponent. Usually we have kind of a surprise team, or I don't know if usually, but often we do. And, that team usually can't win. Well, Colorado beat a team that can win and has won.
Right.
And, and so I think that speaks too. So I think Colorado is going to go down as one of the great champions, even if they didn't, if they don't win another one, or win another one within the next 3 or 4 years, because this was just a great win. They were a terrific team, and now they've got their work cut out for them to try to, keep McKinnon, and they've got, now all of a sudden it's become imperative that they re-sign Nikushkin, and they'll have to make a decision on Barahovsky. So there's work to be done here.
Yeah,
there's tons of work to be done. And another thing I was really impressed with, Jared Bednar is such a great story too. He is he's one of the stories that people don't. He spent, I was reading, I think it's like 7 years as playing in the ECHL, and then another 9 years coaching in the ECHL, 16 years in the ECHL. That's like an insane amount of time in the ECHL. That's ridiculous. Then he gets promoted to the AHL, and he finally gets his big break as a head coach for the Erie River Monsters, and goes on that run. And who's he promoted to? Who hires him out to promote him to there?
Sick.
Bill Zito, who was the GM of the Erie Lake Monsters.
He was, Lake
Monsters. Yeah.
He's the one who brings him into the Lake Erie Monsters. And then, then he gets hired away from Columbus, after he does a hell of a job at the AHL for 2 seasons, where that team was just dominant.
In his first year, most fans wanted him fired because of that horrible year they had.
Right, he goes to Columbus, and they had that horrendous year, which wasn't his, which was all started by like Patrick Waugh losing it at the end. Remember that? Like Patrick Waugh loses it at the end of the summer. So he's, Bednar is brought in at the last minute to run the team, and that team has a terrible season. But Sakic said it wasn't his fault. What happened was not his fault, and Sakic sticks with him, and then here we are. I mean, it was a really great story.
I was impressed that he's the only one or one of two coaches that's won ECHL, AHL, and NHL championship.
I think he's the only one.
He's the only one they said.
Yeah.
They still not putting the game broadcast. Yeah.
I love somebody on social media said, he's got that because no one else starts as low as he is.
Right. No one starts at the ECHL.
I think we're going to bring up something else too.
But Cooper starts that low. Cooper starts as a head coach for his law firm team. And then gets asked by the local high school if he wants to coach. That's how Cooper starts.
Yeah, no, that's good.
The guys, someone else, but I'm just looking here. Someone else says, I think there's only been 4 people who have ever coached in all 3 leagues. I mean, you think so.
Something else we can fold into this. I wrote this morning after getting a lot of feedback, really for the last year, and got tired of seeing it as to why their team didn't pick Cale Makar. So I wrote an article. This is why your team didn't draft Cale Makar. And even though he only went 4th, so I went back and I remembered a certain amount, and then I wanted to find out other things. Probably the most astonishing thing I found out was he didn't even have a seat in the green room like many of the top 10 draft picks. He sat in the stands. So he was drafted 4th overall and got called, and he had to come out of the stands, which you would never see now. So that's one thing. I also pointed out that when they had the prospects on the boat in Chicago and we were interviewing them, there was probably about 8 or 9. He wasn't one of them. And he was ranked 9th by Central Scouting in North America, and I had him ranked about 13th. And, that's what everybody thought because, hey, he was coming out of a league that not a lot of people trusted. And even though he had the speed and the shot, he also was 5'10", 5'11", 180 pounds, and that came into play too. So Colorado was gutsy, and they're the ones that deserve all the accolades because they took a chance. I did also point out some scouts said he could end up being the best player in the draft, and that's true. And those teams never got a chance to pick for Makar. But I also don't recall a ton of stories where people were trying to trade up to get Makar either because they were worried about him going as high as 4th. So I think revisionist history has really been bad on this one because this is how sometimes players develop even into something much greater than you thought they could be.
He's the definition of a high risk, high reward guy.
Yeah. That's a great point. And he was his humility was really apparent last night too, I thought. And when he was talking, just the down to earth guy he is too. Just love to see that. I mean, he's going to be such a superstar. Go ahead, Mike.
Just have to touch on the Lightning because I mean, what a fantastic team. They went through a lot of injuries. Vasilevsky, I mean, you could see how much they wanted this because, I mean, Vasilevsky coming off the ice, kicking the wall, he lost it.
Yeah.
Kucherov with like 20 seconds left to go was trying to get a stick from the trainer. The trainer was slow to get him the stick, and he was kicking the boards, or he was losing his mind.
He broke his stick on the boards, the one he had.
Yeah, and
he threw his gloves, and he said, "That's it, I'm done."
They the icing that wasn't late in regulation that got waved off. But I also have to say, for as much as they wanted and as many classy things and classy players that they have, Patrick Maroon taking a baseball swing at Josh Manson in front of the net after Lehkonen scored. Corey Perry's continuing, just cheap shottedness. I mean, for all the good that they had, Kev, there was some cheap stuff that I think it was not exactly reflective of a 2-time Stanley Cup champion.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with those actions, but it's just not what I'm going to remember about the team or this series, or and people are going to do what they're going to do, and we can all pass judgment on those individual players, but I don't think it really is a reflection on this team. For the most part, this team is. Stamkos and Vasilevsky and, John Cooper is always a model of humility. He always says, the better team won, so I think for the most part, they are a classy team. And, I certainly wouldn't. So
I think some karma. I did tweet the other day with the too many men on the ice that I felt like karma was going to catch up to John Cooper. And it did when Landeskog blocked that shot and his skate blade came off. and McKinnon was carrying him across the ice so he could get out of there so it wouldn't be too many men. And the referees did the right thing, and they were just like, you know what? We are not going down this road. It has nothing to do with the play. You got your chance with that. We're not doing another.
Do you think too many men on the ice reflects on class?
Oh, yeah. When Cooper's screaming about it from the bench, I do. He was screaming at the top of his lungs.
I don't see that. Yeah.
So. I mean, but again, like he was. Like that's just I'm not saying he's not a classy guy, but in game.
That's gamesmanship. That's like, okay,
whatever you want to call it.
Give us the penalty that you didn't give them or
whatever you want to call it.
Yeah. Okay, Ack, let me just spread out here for 1 minute to address one thing that happened last night because I think when Nazem Kadri interviewed on CBC was asked by David Amber and Elliot Friedman regarding the fans that had supported him in Toronto, and he says, I love them, but to all the fans who believe I was a liability in the playoffs, you can kiss my ass. That's what he said. And I'm like, okay, he has every right to say that because now he's a Stanley Cup champion and he's going to make a lot of money in free agency. And, he'll always have that. And he proved people wrong doing what he did this year. He had a fantastic year, a really good playoff. He came back from an injury and scored a key goal. But that doesn't change the history that he was for 3 seasons, the player that cost 3 of the teams that he played for the chance to advance in the playoffs. He was a massive idiot 2 years in a row in Toronto, and he was an idiot again in the playoffs for Colorado when he hit Justin Falk. Just because you came through and did something and grew up and learned your lesson after 11 years in the NHL doesn't mean that those people who criticized you, me included, were wrong. You were a liability because you cost those teams the chance to win. I'm glad you've straightened it out. He's going to make a ton of money. Somebody's going to overpay him. That's my opinion. But he deserves that. But to call those people, to tell them to kiss their ass, Naz, your focus is a little off because they were right.
To me, listen, that question is a ridiculous question to ask him. What did the Toronto Maple Leafs have to do with anything at this point?
Right. No, it was the fans, the fans and the supporters, and
but just the fans and supporters. Even that, no one's asking, Belmar, if he's what he feels of the Flyers fans. It's right. It's like this is every one of these guys. Corey Perry, they've all gone through crazy situations.
Alden Cabell was cut from the Flyers, and he won a Stanley Cup.
He won a Stanley Cup. I know. It's like and no one says, "Well, what do you say to them now?"
But CBC
it's so
CBC's catering to a Canadian audience. That's
it's so stupid. It's just trying to get people riled up for no reason.
Yeah, I don't know about that. I think that's a legitimate question, just for the reasons that Mike laid out. He had a history of that. However, I disagree with Mike. You can get criminal acts expunged from your record over time. Yeah. And for Mike to rant and say that he will forever be remembered at some point, if he's been a model citizen. It reminds me of, Ed Belfour, terrible, never going to be a playoff goal until he won. And then all of a sudden, so I think you can certainly reconcile your past actions with better behavior.
Right.
Now, Colorado wasn't going to win this cup without him. That's
now he's going to be remembered for scoring an overtime goal with a broken thumb.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I think it's just disingenuous to say that that he can't. That we have to still remember that he screwed up when he was younger, if now he continues on and he plays like a model citizen. However, I thought it was wrong just from what he said, just in terms of, and maybe it's a football mentality because what reminds me, but, football coaches, when you're young, what do they tell you? When you get to the end zone, act like you thought you were going to be there. Yeah. And when you acknowledge what he did, what you're saying is it really got to me. It got under my skin, and I would never have wanted that to be that. When you do that, then you're just saying, they got to me, and so I would have thought the best thing is just to keep moving forward, not acknowledge it. You let your play speak for itself. I wouldn't have said that. I thought that was a kind of a juvenile comment.
Well,
No, it
Kev,
is.
I'll give you. I mean, Nazem Kadri, and I've covered the Leafs for more than a decade and been credentialed for a long time. Nazem Kadri blocked me on Twitter because I rightfully criticized him for things that he did as a Leaf. I gave him credit when he deserved it. I criticized him when he did, and he blocked me on Twitter. That's his freedom. That's fine, and that's good. But you know, and like I said, he deserves every plaudit he gets from people for the way he played this season and for the stuff that he and his family went through, which was sickening and disgusting. Yeah. The death threats and all that stuff. But it doesn't make you forget. You know, he will be remembered more now for the goal in overtime than he will for cross-checking Jake DeBrusk or hitting Justin Falk. But
I don't know about that, Mike.
I
don't think that is how he's remembered more. I mean, it depends on who's doing the remembering. You know, like
yeah, I think that's important.
I mean, in Toronto, he's always going to be remembered. He's not going to be remembered for the overtime goal in Toronto. That's not what they're going to. They're always going to think of him as like the guy who was so bad that we had to trade him for like a bag full of pucks.
And they didn't trade him for a bag full of pucks.
No, but I mean, comparably, obviously the Leafs got killed in that trade. When you look at where he is and where he's going to go and what he's become, but it wasn't a bag full of pucks is extreme.
Here's the way I took it. He's got a jerky nature to him.
Sure.
I don't know if he made a one-off quote or whatever, but he complained about the ice after like game 4, saying it was garbage. And then when he was asked about it before the game yesterday by Emily Kaplan, he just acted like he didn't say it, and he's just like, it's okay.
I mean, the right thing to say if you're him when you're asked this question is, listen, a lot of people said a lot of bad things about me over the years. I made some mistakes. I used a lot of the really negative stuff as motivation to turn into the player I am now, and you're done.
And he clearly did. And good players, you know, throughout sports, Kev, players use slights, whether they be real or imagined. Like Michael Jordan always used slights to motivate them. And if Kadri did that that makes a ton of sense. But the slights were for, you know, as somebody who criticized them, they were not because – you know, I didn't like Nazem Kadri. They were because he did something stupid, not once, not twice, but 3 times in his career that cost his team. So, you know, he's going to.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the players do that. And that, you know, I think everybody kind of does that in their own lives as well. Sure. Right. You know, you're trying to prove whatever to your boss or to your spouse or whatever. But I just thought he shouldn't talk about it. You know, to me, when you do that, you're just acknowledging that, you allowed them to get under your skin where, you know, to me, the guys that you're most impressed with are those who just plow through it and never acknowledge it, just keep moving. So
at this time, I mean, the reporter was trolling him essentially. And, you know,
I guess so, but I think you have to ask that because
the reporter knows him and he knew what he was going to get out of him.
Yeah.
Well, the history there is not. It's not a one-time occurrence. It was multiple times.
Right. And David Amber is a pretty straight shooter. He, you know, I don't think it was a gotcha question, Ack. I think it was just like, okay, you know, you've had a number of fans in Toronto and a number of people in Toronto who have supported you through thick and thin. What do you want to say to them? And he said, I love them. But then he took the opportunity to go the opposite direction and get a hit on the people who.
But Mike, it wasn't a gotcha question, but he knew he was going to get a loaded answer out of him. He knew.
I mean, and as a reporter, I guess I
covered him for all those years. He knew.
You knew. God, was going to say something.
Well, and speaking of that, since we're talking about reporters asking questions, I've read on social media about Emily Kaplan's interview style, in game. And people have really missed the boat. Like
she's done a good job.
People have criticized her on the simplistic nature of her questions. And anybody who's had even a single journalism class knows that's the way you ask questions to make sure you get an answer. When a lot of times the television reporters, you sort of answer the question themselves in asking the question instead of, the way a journalist would do it, where you would just leave it simple so that all the elaboration has to be provided by the interview subject, and that's what she does. And she has even written that to people that's what she's doing.
Right.
I thought
it's been very effective. Like she gets good answers.
Yeah, I thought she did a fantastic job.
Yeah.
And Ray Ferraro, as usual, was great in between. I do have a little criticism though about ESPN and ABC. The in between periods with Messier and Chelios, they really don't say anything insightful. I mean, I wish they would I'm sure they're I don't know them personally, but I'm sure they have a lot more to say than they have been saying, and they should basically give them a cue to express themselves a little more. And I wasn't completely enthused with Sean McDonough as the play-by-play guy. He did a good job. He doesn't seem like a natural hockey guy. I wish if for a signature event like that, the NBA's got Mike Breen as their play-by-play guy for the NBA final. I wish they would find somebody who was more of a natural play-by-play.
Should have been Buccigross, right? Like, I mean, why isn't that Buccigross? Because he's the guy who really has been like the guy at hockey.
He's a good guy. It could be him. I'll say this though: post game, just the on ice stuff before like the reporters got there. And the interviews, the video montages, that's where ESPN made it up. They actually did a very good job with that.
Yeah. Well, here, this is my take on the whole television thing. TNT's between periods show is much better. And, Bissonnette adds juice to it. Gretzky has improved. That's not really his cup of tea.
No.
But he's tried, and he's worked at it. He's gotten a little bit better. Tocchet is very insightful. I think he adds to that. Anson Carter is very smooth, very insightful. I think they're better between periods. And Messier is just weak. He's the weak link. Chelios has at least improved. He's brought in his humor as he's moved on.
I will say that.
Yeah, he's gotten better. He's big in it. And here's what I would say to both Messier and to even Chris, and that is if I was the director or producer or whatever the deal, I would say to them, be Keith Jones, don't be Mary Melrose. In other words, do your homework, go talk to people.
Yeah,
because I think that's what they're lacking. They're just trying to talk about their game from their own personal experiences instead of getting down there, talking to players in the in the morning skate. And you could tell, I mean, that it's all on when they played and how they felt and what they would do, and a lot of that is good because they were elite level players, but you have to give them more. You got to give insight based on what's happening now, and I think that's where they have failed. Where Bissonnette,
it's a great point.
Kevin Weeks, like when Kevin Weeks, he's talking to everybody. So he's got the full story and the full scoop. Keith Jones, another guy, does a lot of homework, does a lot of interviewing, knows what's going on. I'm not getting it from my superstars.
Fantastic point. And I want to bring this up because I think that's a really fantastic point, Kevin. Do you think that superstar players have a little bit of a kind of like a icky feeling about being reporters like that? Like they go, you know what I mean? I think that plays into
that's right on. I think that's their problem is that
they shouldn't take the job because they know.
I agree.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't beat the analysis. And I was flip-flopping between ABC and CBC. Their in between periods panel, Jen Botterill is fantastic. Kevin BX, Kelly Rudy broke down that goal that Kemper gave up in the first period. Broke it down point by point to explain why.
Rudy's great.
It was fantastic. And then they had Amber and Friedman. Their coverage is and Ron McLean. Their coverage is fantastic. And TNT's is pretty decent. ESPN has got a little work.
Well, they have to be an elite level player. Like Kevin said. You have to become good at your job and make yourself more interesting. I think with Messier, he's always guarded, and he's continuing to be guarded and is afraid to say things.
I think he's afraid to go into a locker room and interview people. Like, I think he's probably just like, that's not what I do. I'm the guy who's interviewed.
I'm Mark Messier. Yeah.
It's right. Where if he really thought about it, or if someone could if he really could switch, he might have the best ability to get great stuff out of people because players will look at him and respect him as Mark Messier. They'll look at
if he could, want to do that.
He gets that leap, right?
I think Gretzky at least gets it. Like, I'm just going to use anybody who saw the Paul Bissonnette when he went in and gave the pregame speech to the Edmonton Oil Kings at the Memorial Cup. Well, he went there by invitation of Gretzky. And Gretzky knows that's not his style. He's not good in that. So he went in and did what he does, which is to talk about that the Memorial Cup is important, so important, in fact, that when you get to the NHL, you're still using that for bragging rights. Like, I won the Memorial Cup. You tell that to everyone. But he also was smart enough to know what real TV is about to ask the net to do that. And I think that's sort of the difference between Gretzky and Messier. Gretzky understands it. He's trying to be a little bit better. It's hard for him, but he's trying. You can tell. I mean, he's added things to it. And also, his level of insight is different than Mark's. Gretzky kind of has an understanding that goes beyond Mark's.
Yeah, Mark's is more boilerplate. We've heard a lot of it before. That's the problem. Yeah,
and I think Messier needs to step up, or he's got to be replaced.
It's Casper Milquetoast. It's nothing insane. I learned from him.
Yeah, and he was a great player, but we've
there are times when he's, and it's rare, but there have to me, if you're going to have a Mark Messier on the panel, he's got to be there on the side, throwing in comments here and there that Mark Messier would throw in, right? Like not like leading, like not like talk about this goal, but just like being like the I don't know, like in Philly, I don't know if this makes any sense. So Al Morganti, who's usually popular, just won an award, just as Ferguson Award, right? His Ferguson Award winner this year. Mm-hmm. I grew up reading Morganti. I loved him. He was one of my favorites as a kid. The joke is at Temple, I would get Al Morganti, I would get the Philadelphia Inquirer, Philadelphia Daily News, and the USA Today every day, and I would read Kevin Allen, Al Morganti, and Tim Panaccio, and I go through this, and this is who I would read.
Well, that's why you are who you are. But anyhow,
who I am, right? So that's who I would read before I was doing this, right? So, but then Al Morganti, who's got tons of personality, and I became really lucky enough to call a friend now. Tons of personality. Is also on the sports talk radio station here in Philly in the mornings, and you guys wouldn't know this, but he's on this station with Keith Jones and two other guys, and there's one guy on there who's like the dominating. He's like the radio guy, and he's like he leads everything. Jonesy has a lot of his like quippy things and funny things. Morganti sometimes will go through an entire show without speaking, almost like he'll just sit there, and you're like, radio show. But the guy who runs it, Angelo Cataldi, his name is, refused to re-up his contract unless Morganti was re-upped. And this guy has a lot of power. So Morganti continues to get a job there. Why? Because Al, every once in a while, not by preparing anything or anything like that, but just has this incredible, like, bam moment of insight that throws out there. And it's worth it.
And that's not something we're going to get out of Messier.
I think if you can get like a Messier type or a Gretzky, that's what those guys need to be doing if you're going to get the best out of them.
Why do I have a weird feeling that next year you're going to see Pierre Maguire on that panel or somebody because Pierre Maguire, once you get him started talking, he never stops.
I don't know if you're going to see Pierre Maguire and Chris Chelios. That doesn't seem like a mix.
No, maybe not.
But he's used to doing that. Morganti, and it's hard. It's a hard thing for like Chelios and Messier.
No, but I also not sure that's how he acts on that show. But on the Flyers pregame, he does break down plays. Messier, it's almost like he won't break down a play, like because he doesn't want to be wrong or he doesn't know the players well enough or it's something, but he won't break down plays.
But what he does best, he's like the energy level wasn't there. He'll bring in the kind of stuff that Messier.
He's good at discussing leadership.
Right.
When he talks about that, he's been pretty good. But you allow me now an opening, as they say in the legal system, that I can talk about Morganti because I did want to do that. I haven't had a chance since he was named. And what Eric Tahachuk and I, for those of you who don't know Eric Tahachuk, he was a longtime Canadian writer. Now he works for The Athletic, still working, and he and I were recalling with great enjoyment of, in the 80s, looking forward to going into Philly because you had both Jay Greenberg, who also the late Jay Greenberg,
right,
who would be dueling competitors against Al Morganti, and they were completely different writers, but they were both highly entertaining and very, very insightful. And when you read them, you knew they didn't need to interview the coach to write about the game.
Right.
Like that's number one. You knew that by the way they wrote, and of course the deadlines were different and all that. And what I loved about Al is, Jay's was an essayist, and his leads were always very elaborate, and he had a lot of cleverness in his first 7 paragraphs. Al, his cleverness would be in paragraph 15.
Yeah.
You'd be reading his story, and you'd go there, and all of a sudden, paragraph 15, there'd be the funniest line that you would have said to yourself, "I'd have led with that," But that's not Al. Al just wherever it fit, it fit.
Yeah.
And both those guys. I mean, it was really like seeing Crosby versus Ovechkin. When you were journalists, like it. No other city, even in like Montreal and Toronto, did you have kind of that level of competition. So for me as a writer to see both Al Morganti and Jay Greenberg to have come away with Elmer Ferguson really it's really fun for me, because those two were just fantastic competitors, and they were friends too. But and they were rivals, and they were entertaining writers. They were both great reporters as well. So this was really a good choice. I'm glad they put him in, because Al was getting forgotten because he's now been electronic for so long. People forgot he was a writer.
Right. I mean, and it's a great. I mean, Al, like Jay Greenberg, wrote for Hockey Buzz. The last place he worked. And when we were talking to him about writing, he called Al Morganti to check up on me, and it was really interesting. I Al called me up. He's like, "Yeah, Jay just checked up. Just asked if you were a good guy." And I told him I gave him my answer, and I'm like, "Well, what was your answer?" And he's like, "I gave him my answer," and that's all Al said to me on the phone. And he was just being Al, like he was just busting on me and everything like that. But obviously Jay came and worked with me, because it was obviously it was good things he said, but it was really. But you're right, like a lot of cities have there's a Kevin DuPont or a Helene Elliott, or these people like one person in the city, but to have and even like even a Larry Brooks, but to have like 2 of those guys in the same city, you're right, Kevin.
Right. Well, and both could be very gifted writers. Like, there are, top journalists who just aren't as entertaining as Jay and Al are. So,
Well,
so
you had the advantage of knowing Al through his writing in Philadelphia. Like, I didn't really see him or get into him, so to speak, until he worked for ESPN, and he was sort of the conduit, like doing like the weekly, like inside the NHL reporting on rumors and things of that nature. It's sort of like what Jim Kelly in Buffalo did on his Sunday columns. He did an inside the NHL column that was always informative, and that's that sort of fueled my passion for hockey, because I was always into trade rumors and what's going on in the league, and they conveyed that information in a really concise manner. So I'm glad he did get the Homer Ferguson.
Yeah, and one other thing about Al Morganti, though, it just kind of sums it up. People have forgotten now, but there was at one point a national sports publication. They started called The National. And they went out and they were going out and trying to get the best, much like The Athletic did. They wanted to go out to get the best people. And they had certain things. They were looking for someone who was not too old, not too young, that kind of thing. But they could have anyone. And they went out and they took Al Morganti. That was their choice. They wanted him. I think they thought he was, kind of fit the demographics. But more importantly, he was just so talented. And he, got the job done. And, of course, that ended up being a springboard for him to get to ESPN and to, really move into electronic. And so, I think that was the first recognition nationally that he was going to be a top guy.
Kev, we need to do a special edition of the Cranky Hockey Writers and bring Al back for a podcast. You, me, and him just one time to talk to him before this award goes.
And Eric. Get
Eric too, but I would love to just get us with Al would be great. We should do that. I'm going to make that happen. All right, so we used most of the time today, which is fine. But I wanted to launch into something that we're going to be kind of going into this week a little bit. Now that we are in the off/on season, as I call it, this is the on season. It officially started this morning, and the idea here is now the draft coming, free agency coming after that. It's I like that it's all after the 4th of July. It's nice that it's like pushed back and not like in the middle of it all, which is kind of cool.
Well,
But
July 1 begins the buyout window, and that's
July 1 is the buyout window, right? Which is going to be a big day.
Yeah.
And we're going to get into that too this week for sure. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what GMs are doing right now. And I wanted to get into the concept of windows. And we always talk about windows opening or closing or shut,
right?
What they are. And so I was trying to think of every year I've tried to refine this. So here's my category. And we're going to talk about individual teams. We'll start with some Eastern Conference teams today and get through what we can do. But we'll go through this week. Here's my various categories, okay, that I come. The first is the window is wide open. This means, obviously, that a team is in their sweet spot. This was Colorado this year. This is a team that's completely in their sweet spot. They are ready. All they need to do is win a cup. That's what they have to do. That's where they are. That's where they've gotten to. Then there's the windows open but closing. Maybe, I don't know if you put Tampa in this category. I think maybe the Capitals the last couple of years have been in that category, just like a team that had a window open but is sort of shutting. Maybe the Bruins are perhaps there. And then you have window opening, which is just a team that is on the trajectory. Florida Panthers, for example, like window opening to me. The Rangers. These are teams that are going to be a factor. Maybe not quite ready to win a Stanley Cup yet, but close. And those are the three easy ones. But then I had some that I thought were more fun, which are kind of for this thing, which is like windows stuck halfway open. Right, we've all had a window stuck halfway open. That's a bad idea, right? Like you can't open it, you can't close it. When it rains, everything's going to get wet inside. And there are teams that have their windows stuck halfway open. It's kind of like the teams are stuck in mediocrity, kind of. We've seen that a couple times. And then there's window painted shut. We've seen this too. Like a team that tries to do good by painting the frame of the window. It's going to look better, right? But they realize at the end of the day that they painted the window shut, and they've got to get special tools now to even open the window. And finally, window shopping. People who need a window. They don't even have a window to talk about yet, and they're out there looking. They need to cut a hole in the drywall and get things going here because that's how far away they are.
That's Montreal Canadiens.
So that's
most creative categories we've ever had. So.
Yeah, thank you, Kevin. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, they're good. I like them. Windows shut, I like a lot, and painted shut. We've all dealt with those, and stuck. I live in an older house. I know what stuck windows are. So
right.
Why don't we go through the teams quickly and just say what we think on.
Let's start in the East, and let's start in the Atlantic Division. Right up in Canada. We can start with
Ottawa.
We can start with Ottawa. Let's start with Ottawa. Like to me, Ottawa is a window opening team. I feel like their window is opening. Some people might not think they're that far along.
I think they're a window painted shut because they're sort of spinning their. They have lots of young talent, but they're sort of spinning their wheels. So I don't know where they're going. I mean,
I think they're looking for a window.
Yeah.
I think they're painted shut too. A lot of talent, as I said, but this is not them. Like there's no ray of sunshine getting in that window. So.
Interesting. All right, I like it. All right, let's go to Boston. I already kind of hinted that I think window closing.
I think they're sort of window open but closing because of the age, because of the contract situations. Bergeron reportedly is going to come back for a year, so that staves off the need for going out and signing a number one center. But really, the contract situations and everything else, they could still be a good team and a contender, but the window is closing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm with Mike completely, just for all the reasons he articulated. And I'll add in, Russ called them a dysfunctional management group, and that is another factor. I think it is dysfunctional. I don't think everyone's on the same page.
Yeah, I agree with the other two.
And they just
extended, right? They just extended
Don Sweeney. Yeah, they just extended Sweeney
because Don did the dirty work and fired Bruce Cassidy, so he got an extension.
Cam Neely's running the whole thing.
There's no question about it.
All right, let's go to Detroit, Kevin. Detroit's windows. Someone in the chat room said they're blowing open. Go ahead. What do you think?
Well, not if you listen to Steve Yzerman. He still says it's closed, that we're still a ways away. I think what the person in the chat room is saying is, I think the fan base is very excited about the talent that are coming to the job Steve doing. But I tend to believe Steve Yzerman, and he says his team isn't ready. He was very disappointed with how they played. He was unhappy with most of those players, how they performed last season, with the exception of obviously Moritz Seider and Lucas Raymond. So I would still say it's shut just based on what Steve Yzerman tells us.
So he's chipping away at the lead paint chips, trying to get the
I can't change that one.
Yeah, no, me neither. That I'm good on that.
See, I'm gonna be a little bit more optimistic, but that's me.
I'm shocked.
I love their defense. I love the young talent that they have. It's hard to imagine. Sometimes with Yzerman, I can't imagine that Yzerman. I think Yzerman is like the key of under promising, over delivering type person.
Yeah, you don't know Steve Yzerman then. If you don't, then
okay.
I can't wait to tell him that my friend Eklund called you a liar, Steve. So
not a liar, not a liar. Please don't do that.
I'm joking.
Under promising, over delivering. Like I think he's got more talent than he's letting on.
Yeah,
we're 2 to 3 years away.
Yeah, no, the random Canuck. Yeah, so he's right on. So.
Yeah. There you go. So there you go.
Montreal is window shopping. They're
looking for a window. They need to throw a hole in the wall.
After making the Cup final, they were an aimless, disorganized organization until they fired their GM Bergevin. Now they bring in Saint Louis. They have the number 1 pick, but they're going to trade off a lot of their veterans. There's talk about Josh Anderson being traded, about Gallagher being traded. So they're going to rebuild. And it's going to take probably 2 or 3 years at least. Now, they're a proud organization and, steeped in history, but that doesn't mean that it's going to be any quicker. So
they're window shopping. That Anderson contract, it's brutal because unless he's scoring goals or beating you up, that's all he does.
Yeah.
I'm bullish on this team only in that I really like the idea of Suzuki and Wright moving ahead in the future. But I'm going to go along with window shopping as well because there's so much we just don't know. We don't even know what the roster will look like a year from now. We don't know about Price.
Nope.
We don't know if Petrie is really going to be traded. So because of that, I think we're just trying to look for a way to look outside and see what's going on. We don't know yet. So.
Yeah. I like that. All right, Russ, I want you to tell me about Buffalo.
Buffalo, I think the window is creeping open. I think this is a year where if their goaltending develops by next year, I think they'll start making a little bit of a statement. So I think the window's creeping open. They're going to have Quinn in there. They'll have Pekka Luukkonen. It's looking much better. It's just not there yet.
Yeah, by the Bishop move, it sort of signals that they're going to be a cap floor team. They're not going to spend money. They're probably not going to go out and acquire a goaltender, so they don't think that they're ready to contend for a playoff spot. They're going to give Luukkonen a lot of work. I would agree. It's sort of stuck halfway open because I don't think they know what they really are yet, and this is a year of sort of discovery.
Yeah, I envision Kevin Adams and Donnie Granato both on that window with their hands on it, trying to get that thing open. Okay, they're together. They're working on this. I like this young team a lot. I think Donnie Granato is a terrific coach, and Kevin Adams has been better than any of us thought he was going to be.
Oh yeah, agree.
Yeah, he's. I think we all thought he had potential, but he really wasn't ready for the job, but he's out to kick his coverage. He's done better than we thought, but he, they haven't got it open yet. They're trying though, and I think they're much further ahead and they're pointed in the right direction.
They got the right tools finally in to open this window. I think that's been the big thing. Like they haven't had the right tool for the right job, right? And I really think that the commitment that they seem to be going with Granato and letting him ride this thing out, which is really because they went from coach to coach to coach to coach to coach. Let Granato. Granato seems to have has enough respect and the love of the players really like him. And also the moving of Eichel changes everything going into this season. This season is not Eichel, and that's been a long time that they haven't been able to say that for a while. The Eichel controversy is not over them anymore. I think that's big.
Florida,
I think wide open.
Yeah, I would say wide open still.
I don't think closing. I don't think they're closing. Although, you can make arguments maybe, but go ahead. What do you think?
No, they're wide open, and Paul Maurice will be better defensively than Burnett was.
Yeah.
So, I think this is a go.
I agree. Tampa.
This is a good one.
I think it's window open but closing, especially if the Palat. Palat's a key player. Again, he's not a big scorer, but he showed himself in the playoffs. But all their key guys are under long-term contracts, so maybe the closing part isn't. That's wishful thinking from some of the people in the Eastern Conference. But I'd say age, wear and tear, and contracts are all going to be factors over the next couple of years.
Yeah, it's open, but it could fall shut during the year if the wrong things happen. But it's open.
I think it's open, but they do have a stick that's holding it up.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Name Vasilevsky.
It is the stick named Vasilevsky. I like that. There's still a lot there. Lot there. But the guys are getting a little older. Stamkos, if everyone remembers, Brian Trache, after he turned 30, he had a lot of miles on that body, and he wasn't the same player. And at some point, Stamkos, he's got a lot of miles. He's got a lot.
He's going to go that way.
Yeah, I fear that way.
And Kucherov, it's like
get some hard miles.
Yeah,
when he went downhill, still led the Penguins, had to help the Penguins win.
He didn't lead them, but he was part of that.
He was a big part of it. I mean, a big. He
was a role player.
Yes.
Yeah, he was a role player. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, smart player, still a smart player, but he wasn't Brian Trache.
No,
right, he wasn't Brian Trache.
Toronto. I will say window open but closing, and the closing is not due to age. It's due to Matthews having 2 years left in his contract, Marner having 3 years left in his contract, and the inability of Kyle Dubas to make the moves that he needs to make, which means probably trading William Nylander, opening up cap space, and either getting a goaltender or getting a defenseman and improving the team where they need to be improved. They continue. If you look at what happened in Game 6, Colorado played shutdown defense in the third period against Tampa Bay. The Toronto Maple Leafs cannot do that the way they're currently constructed. They need if they want to win, they're going to have to play that type of hockey. And right now, this team can't do it. So that window is closing, and they need to be able to adjust to do that.
I would say their window's broken, and they're going to have to call a serviceman. And if they get the right goalie, they could fix that window. And if they don't, it might stay broken.
That's not one of the options, Russ.
That's my option.
That's your option.
I'm going window open because all those things Mike talked about have nothing to do with the window. Right. They got the talent. Yeah. And Mike's right about everything he says, but they got the talent, and it's still a lot of talent there. They're going to score a lot of goals. Now, they're going to need to gussy up that window a little bit and figure it out. But
balance.
Put some treatment.
I'm going to say this team is a team that has to not be afraid to turn the air conditioner off and open the friggin' window. That's what I'm going to say about Toronto. The window opens cleanly open, but they're terrified of things like the fact that Mike, you bring up these contracts that are still a couple years away. Everybody has. Look at the team that just won the friggin' Stanley Cup. They've got the ultimate contract there.
Except that they don't have a goalie.
In McKinnon, they should be should they be terrified about McKinnon?
No, because they're going to get McKinnon signed. Why would they?
They're going to get Matthews signed, and I'm not. Those things aren't it's not going to happen.
If they lose in the first round 8 years in a row, Austin Matthews could leave. They need to have success in the next 2 years, and the only way they're going to have success is to change the way that team is.
No, I don't think it's. We've talked about this enough, but I think that the reality here is that they could play Toronto again today and beat them in a 7-game series. It could go either way. I could play Tampa again today. And beat them in a 7-game series.
I don't believe that.
They lost in the first round because they played Tampa. If they played anybody else in the conference,
I'm not sure about that.
I don't believe that. I'm sorry. It's a psychological.
They would have beaten Florida. They would have beaten Boston.
Psychological barrier that that this group cannot break. They need to. I keep saying this. They need to make a paradigm shift to that team. And I think the only way that they can do that is to improve either in goal or in defense. And the only way you can do that is to open up cap space by trading a guy like a Nylander in a deal.
I don't know, Kevin.
Who are we on now?
No, we're still on Toronto. I said
my piece on Toronto.
You said my piece on Toronto. My thing is this team is very much in danger of
Do you want to go through the Metro? Or you want to say that for tomorrow?
We'll hold the Metro for tomorrow. They're very much in danger of doing something stupid, and they were incredibly close to being in the Stanley Cup final this year, even though they lost in the first round. And that's the reality.
Counts and horseshoes and hand grenades.
The reality is the talent is there, and if they do too much and trade too many people away, they're going to screw that up. And it's a fine balance.
Yeah, but the only thing I'll say in that regard,
you
can't screw it up worse than it's been getting screwed up. So you have to do something.
They played a hell of a series, Russ. They didn't screw this up.
Oh my God, you're gonna fall back.
Do you think they screwed up in the playoffs this year? I don't think Toronto screwed up. Toronto has screwed up in other years. They screwed up last year.
They had a 3-2 lead in the series. They screwed up.
They won game 1. They didn't seize on their chances in game 2, game 4, game 6, and game 7. Other than that, they did great. I mean,
but the same reason Colorado didn't screw up against the same team, the Leafs did.
Yeah, but Colorado didn't play anybody as tough as Tampa until Tampa was totally beaten to hell. Like, and Tampa was
Colorado would have beaten anybody in their path.
I would have liked to have seen Colorado and Tampa in the first round with Tampa being completely healthy. I think that would have been interesting.
Tampa lost arguably their best playoff performer next to Vasilevsky in the first period of game 7, Braden Point, and Toronto could not beat them and got beaten by 2 goals by Nick Paul. And I'm not slamming Nick Paul, but they had opportunities in that series to beat Tampa, who we all said were not playing great at the time. And Tampa found a way to win, and Toronto found a way to lose.
I mean, here's what I would say.
I stand by this statement, Andrew. I stand by my statement, Alexander. I know it's
Colorado only lost 3 or 4 games in the entire Stanley Cup playoffs.
Right.
So how is that the same as the Leafs?
No, I mean, no, I'm not saying it's the same as the Leafs. I'm saying that I'm not comparing Colorado to the Leafs. I'm really not. What I'm saying here is that the third best team in these playoffs may have been the Toronto Maple Leafs.
Oh my God. I'd say Edmonton was better, and you know how much
they came so close. They came so close to beating Tampa, and Tampa was the second best team in the playoffs, right?
I mean, I'll just say this: the Edmonton Oilers. I heard a hockey reporter who was one of the people that voted for the Conn Smythe give serious consideration to voting for Connor McDavid for the Conn Smythe, who didn't even play in the Stanley Cup final because he led the playoffs in scoring. Edmonton had a better playoffs than Toronto did. They got to the conference final.
No, they did, but that doesn't mean they were a better team. Edmonton, Toronto, and
what does it mean?
What does it mean, Act? If you don't win,
Toronto versus Edmonton, and take Toronto.
What is the measure of judgment? It's
if you win.
It matters. It matters who you play. That's all.
No, it matters if you win or not. That's what it matters. That's what matters.
You're saying Toronto would have beaten the Rangers too?
No. I mean, yes, Russ. I do. That's what there said. I think I would have taken Toronto.
I'm going to have a stroke.
Toronto over the Rangers. I would have
just shut it down.
I'm just going to have a stroke. All right.
You guys are baffling. All right. I guess
we'll talk about the Metro tomorrow.
I'm crazy. I guess you lose by 1 goal to the team that almost wins their 3rd Stanley Cup in a row. You should just blow it up
in the first round.
But it doesn't matter what round it's in, Mike.
It kind of does.
It doesn't. They couldn't help what round they played Tampa in.
Yes, anyway. They could by winning the division.
That's true.
All right, so hold on. So if they would have beaten Tampa, is your contention that they would have won the cup?
They would have gone there. They would have lost to Colorado. That's what I think would have happened. They would have gone to the finals and lost to Colorado. I do think. Like, who did Tampa play? I think Toronto. If Toronto gets past the first round, that big sigh of relief. They might beat
Florida. I don't think they'll.
I think they would have beat Florida, and I think they definitely would have beat.
I don't know if they could beat Shesterkin, but anyway, we'll talk about it.
Tough, but it was tough for Tampa too. I mean, it's not like it wasn't an easy out. So I mean, the reality is but it would have been tough. But Tampa and Toronto were a hair apart. They were just a hair apart, and yet you're going to blow one team up, and the other team's like, oh, their window's wide open still, and could possibly be close. And it's crazy the differences that
one also has a track record of greatness. One doesn't.
Yeah, right. There's no debating that the Leafs are a top 5 team right now. I agree with that, John. There's no debating that, is there?
Nope.
You want to blow them up, Mike, and they're a top 5 team.
Nope, you're right. End the show.
Please.
All right. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Without your brain, it's just whatever. We'll talk to you tomorrow. Thanks.